is part 3 of my mini-series on the stretching portrait ghosts. We've covered the dynamite guy and the tightrope girl in previous episodes. If you haven't seen them, I highly recommend you do. There's a bit of context to the portraits that I explained in those videos, and I won't be repeating myself. With that said, let's continue on with the next portrait, the men in the quicksand. Or the Quicksand Trio, as I like to call them. Who are they? What are their stories? Sit back in your doom buggy as we examine it together. How did quicksand become such a pervasive trope in fiction? In every other movie or show, it seems like characters were always getting stuck in quicksand and trying to escape. Upon doing research, I found an entire YouTube channel dedicated to documenting quicksand scenes in cartoons. It has over 50 uploads. And every few months, someone goes viral on Twitter for quoting that John Mulaney bit where he talks about how he thought quicksand was going to be a bigger problem than it ended up being. Why do people keep using it? I don't have an answer. When your film's set in a desert or jungle somewhere, quicksand is just an easy way to get characters stuck in something. I know I usually analyze how and why tropes become a thing, but I genuinely have nothing to say about this. If you want to learn more, check out this Slate article. There'll be a link in the description. Something I gleaned from that is that the trope of characters falling into quicksand really reached its peak in the 50s and 60s, the exact same time the Haunted Mansion was in development. Maybe they chose to include some characters sinking into quicksand to be topical and hip with the kiddies? Or all those scenes subconsciously influenced them to put characters in quicksand into the attraction? Whatever the case might be, we ended up with a painting of 3 guys sinking into quicksand. I don't have much to say about the portrait itself because there's only so many times you can describe the stretching portrait concept in different ways. Instead, let's shift gears and talk about the stretching room as a whole. The Imagineers knew they had to have a strong opening. It could make or break the entire ride, and a big illusion like the stretching room was a good fit for that. According to Exitentio's script, the foyer was meant to be kind of unimportant and inconsequential. On most days, unless you're right next to the doors when they open, it's going to take you a little while to make it into the foyer. You might miss the ghost host's opening monologue. For all intensive purposes, the stretching room is the first room in the mansion. I'll be talking about the scene at the Magic Kingdom because, in my opinion, the scene is best executed there. The ghost host told us to come into the room before ominously telling us that there's no turning back now. A panel in the wall slides shut without most of the guests noticing. Then, the room begins to stretch. The paintings go from innocuous and innocent to something much more macabre. The walls are creaking and groaning around you, further selling the illusion. All with Exitentio's amazing dialogue and Paul Frees's incredible performance, taunting you about how you're stuck there with no way out. Then, the room suddenly goes silent before the ghost host tells you that there's always his way. The lights go out. Thunder and lightning strike above, revealing a skeleton hanging by a noose. A blood-curdling scream echoes through the air before something crashes. Then, as the lights slowly come back on, the ghost host apologizes for frightening us prematurely, before warning us that the real chills come later. It's the perfect opening in a lot of different ways. It sets the tone, introduces us to the ghost host, and leaves us curious to see more. Lots of Disney rides have stuff like pre-shows and preludes, but I don't think any of them come close to what the Haunted Mansion's done for 50 years. But let's get back on track. Out of all the stretching portraits, the Quicksand Trio is the one I can find the least amount of bonus stuff on. Not a lot of people are interested in their story. Maybe it's because developing 3 guys is more difficult than just the 1 or 2 in the others. Maybe it's because none of them are young and good looking. Once again, I don't have an answer, but they pop up a few times. They got their own dedicated story in the 7th and final issue of the SLG comics, titled 3 of a Kind. The ghost host is still showing the new kid around the stretchy room, and he asks about the Quicksand Trio. They're the Hobbses. Hobbs, Big Hobbs, and Skinny Hobbs. A trio of gamblers who cared about literally nothing else. Unfortunately, a man named Bartholomew Gore figures out they're cheating and chases them out of the saloon they were in. The door leads them directly to a swamp. To escape, they have to pass through a field of quicksand. Big Hobbs says he'll pay the other 2 to carry him across in order for his clothes to not get soiled. An argument ensues until they decide they'll play cards to see who carries who. Big Hobbs ends up on top, and they cross through the quicksand. Skinny Hobbs accuses them of cheating, forcing them to play again. And they just kept going until they died. with the kid from earlier lamenting about how anticlimactic that was. The Epic Mickey variant of this portrait is an interesting departure. They're not just 3 random guys, they're 3 adventuring guys. And they're not sinking into quicksand, it looks like it's water. The Muppified trio included a bunch of pig characters, with Link Heartthrob and Dr. Julius Spankenpork from the Pigs in Space skits, and Miss Poogie from the 2011 Muppet film. It was referenced in, of all shows, Mickey Mouse Funhouse. Mickey and the gang travel to a magic mansion to get back Daisy's lost toy. Not only is there a portrait of the bowler hat guy, but there's another one of Medusa. Haunted Mansion references just pop up in the strangest of places, don't they? I shouldn't have to tell you that the stretching room is one of the most replicated scenes in the entire attraction, to the point where it appears in almost every adaptation. It's impossible to keep track of them all, so I won't bore you with that. I will, however, tell you that you can find small, framed versions of all the stretching portraits at the Port Royale Curios and Curiosities shop in New Orleans Square. So with Haunted Mansion Holiday taking up more of the calendar with every passing year, and with half of New Orleans Square being construction land for the foreseeable future, you can still go visit them anytime at Disneyland. I do also want to highlight how the stretching room is done in the 2023 film, because I thought the way they adapted it was really creative. For the first half of the movie, the stretching room is the only safe place in the mansion after midnight. It's the Dream Team's base of operations. However, right as they figure out how to defeat the villain, he manipulates the room to trap Ben and Travis in there. Not only does the room stretch with no windows and no doors, but the floor takes on the properties of the portraits. There's quicksand, lit dynamite barrels, and even alligators. The portraits come to life, telling them to grab onto the gargoyles, which pulls them up towards the ceiling. It turns out the ceiling isn't really there, and they end up escaping through the rafters of the attic. I love that they added to the scene and made it their own, instead of just doing a one-to-one recreation of the ride. But if you do want a one-to-one recreation of the ride, check out the Minecraft Disney World DLC. It's a perfect version from beginning to end. If you've been keeping track, that's gotten us through 3 of the 4 stretching portraits. Only one more is left. And boy, howdy, will there be a lot to talk about. We'll be covering one of the most famous characters in all Haunted Mansion history. It's going to be one of the biggest videos I'll ever do in this series. So, please sit back in your doom buggy and we will proceed in the next episode. Thanks for watching.